All right. Oh. So we are at the summer solstice. And we are experiencing the longest, well, up here in the Northern Hemisphere, longest days of the year. Southern Hemisphere, shortest. So it's the kind of that, we've got a teeter-totter. We've got the equinoxes that are kind of like right at the balancing point. And then, we've got the solstices that do the teeter-totter action, where we are in one direction more than the other. So it can feel, I find that the solstices can feel energetically overwhelming, whether it's kind of this shortest day of the year, the longest day of the year, like just the idea of that and how we've created negative connotations around it. Not necessarily the day, but like the sense of a bad day is like, oh, that was like the longest day of my life. And then like we have these ideas of like these really good days that seem to fly by, it's like, oh, I was so looking forward to that. And it was such a short day. So we've managed as humans to create stories around everything. And essentially oftentimes can kind of suck the joy out of our own lives. So what would it be to not create story and to just experience things as they are? And Buddhism talks a lot about that idea of non-attachment, like life is going to happen. Just because you're enlightened doesn't mean that it's not still shitty on some days. It just means that our ability to manage our own experience and our own story, our own narrative is better. To be enlightened is just, you're a better storyteller, essentially. You're not getting caught up in the drama of things. You are just able to witness and see what comes up for you, and not react, but instead respond. So I'm finding a lot of that in my life. I'm hearing a lot of that in my clients' lives and in my friends' lives. There's just so much going on. And we tend to make it harder than it has to be, simply by our brains running off with our emotions. So let's do a little meditation to start. So get yourself comfortable. And if you're feeling really stressed, I find that coming into meditation seated, but with my back up against a wall, is really nice. It's very supportive. It's very calming. And it just kind of reminds me that like, there's some solid shit out there that I can lean against, and I don't need to do it all myself. So closing your eyes and watching your breath. Seeing if you can slow the breath down, slow the inhale, slow the exhale. So as we are breathing today, I want you to think about your inhale. It's kind of a sponge. So as we inhale, we're going to pull all of our pieces back into our body. So we have a tendency, we're taught at a very young age that we have to give up pieces of ourselves in order to receive things like love and attention and support. Um, and we're taught that because we have a society that's kind of broken and has taught us that we have to be fractions of ourselves in order to be loved and accepted. And those things are just simply not true. So oftentimes we have lost pieces of ourselves along the way, or given pieces of ourselves away, and that's why we have a sensation of just not being enough, not being whole. We've given those pieces away. So that's kind of the big picture of this sponge, trying to call back all my pieces, all the pieces of me I exchanged for unmet needs, but also just our awareness. As we move through life, there's so many things in our day that is pulling our attention out of our physical body. There's stress, there's work, there's war. do I need to go into this list? So much stuff that lifts us out of our physical body, up into our head, and just oftentimes out of our body completely. So we're calling back on that inhale, also just our awareness, just, letting go, like releasing our attachment to the story of what's going on in our life around us, just disconnecting from conversations we've had at work or with family or with friends or the news or Facebook or Twitter or whatever it is that we've given our attention to today. We're just disconnecting. And on that inhale, we're drawing all of those awarenesses, pieces, attentionnesses back home. And on our exhale, we're allowing ourselves to rest down in our bodies. We're allowing ourselves to come home. Inhale, like a sponge soaking up water, but we're soaking up our own energy, bringing it home. And we exhale and allow ourselves to rest inside of this home that is our body. So our exhale becomes almost like a weighted blanket. There's a softness, a surrender, a release that happens on that exhale that brings us down into our body, makes us heavier. It's a sensation that gravity just got a little thicker. Like the air in the room is hugging us. Noticing as you're inhabiting your body more and more, any places where you're holding tension. So maybe your jaw or your forehead, your shoulders, hands. And use that exhale to soften those areas. We'll take a couple more breaths here. See if we can reach our awareness all the way down into our toes. And then imagining that you are one with the floor you're sitting on. And that you're one with the earth beneath that floor. You're one with the whole earth. So you are just a plant, essentially, that is sitting on the earth, sitting in the earth, growing down into the earth, but also up towards the sky. And from here, we're going to slowly move into Malasana, a squat. So let me get my knees working. Your squat can look however your squat needs to look. So maybe your toes are out, maybe your toes are in. Maybe your heels are up, maybe your heels are down. What I'm concerned about in this pose is that you can open up your chest you can open up your back and you can breathe. So if that means that you're sitting in a chair, great. If that means that you're kind of like in a sumo squat, great. I'm not concerned about how it looks. I'm not concerned if you're sitting on something. This is a nice position to bring yourself into where you're not putting any weight, or not any weight, but much weight in the feet. You're using something to sit on. What I'm concerned about is just the ability to be in your body comfortably. So if it's a place where you're like, I cannot comfortably breathe, I can't open my chest, then that's not where we want to be. And then let your butt fall back down onto the earth. And let's start on our backs. So coming onto your back, hug your knees in your chest. Ooh, pull those knees down and relax the low back so that the pelvis is melting towards the floor. And you should feel a nice stretch and release through the low back. And we want to continue our awareness in our breath. So as you are breathing here, as you inhale, you can feel a little massage happening through the back body as you inhale and expand, and then as you exhale and contract. Gently letting your feet float down to the floor, hip width apart, but as close to your hips as possible. I'm going to grab your block. I'm going to press up into bridge and then take the block, and you've got the low option, the medium option, the high option. Whichever one works for you, you're going to place that right at the tailbone or right at the sacrum. So just above your butt crack, essentially. You relax the arms. And then think about allowing all of the musculature of the torso to really surrender, just like play dead, essentially. And you'll feel that low back really melting, releasing. And then push into your heels, lift up, pull that block out, set it down. Don't set it too far. We're going to use it again. Grab your strap, and the strap is going to come at the knees, and you want the strap to be about the same width as the hips, so that I strap my knees in and my knees are plugged right down into my hips, so they're not pointed in at all, they're not pointed out at all. Okay, and then I do the same thing. I drop my feet back to the floor, I lift my hips up, I slide that block in, bring my heels back down. And it should feel a little bit different because you're really being held in alignment. You're not able to cheat here by dumping the knees out or dumping the knees in. And it should also feel a lot more like you need to track your toes forward. So oftentimes our toes will turn out here. And it can be hard to track those, but it should be easier now that we are kind of tied up. And it should definitely feel different through the pelvis. Relax your glutes here because we're going to be using them in a minute. So we can really be lazy for a moment, let the butt relax. That's going to help the low back release. You want to feel, again, like gravity just got super heavy so that you really can surrender all the way over this block. So every exhale, just think like more muscles release, more muscles release. You'd be really surprised how many muscles are still turned on, even though in theory you're in a completely supported pose. And this is happening throughout our life as we try to rest. We try to relax. Our body's like, no, 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 I have to stay engaged somehow. So starting to actively turn off tissue. And now we're going to we're going to activate all those muscles we just released. So squeeze your glutes and then lengthen your knees away from you. And there's this sense of the pelvis tucking in under. Okay, so my tail lengthens away, my low back lengthens away, and there's a little bit of pressure on that strap because my legs can't go anywhere. So I might as well use the strap to train the legs to go straight here. And then I'm going to just push into my heels more than my toes, slide my block out. Holding here in bridge pose. Really lengthen your low back. Reach those hip points up and your knees away. And it should have a sensation of like the space between your hip points kind of carving out because you're lengthening so much through the waist. And then rolling slowly down through your spine. So keep lengthening your low back so that as you come down, your butt is actually the last thing to touch the floor. Good. And then pull the knees into the chest again. Become aware of the breath in the back body, that gentle massage. And give yourself a couple rocks forwards and backwards. And roll all the way up. Pressing yourself through to a forward fold. Now you'll notice as you stand up that if you take the legs all the way into the strap, your feet are probably a little wider than normal. So you're just going to tighten up your strap a smidge, like an inch or so that those feet come in a little bit more. And I want you to think about pressing your thigh bones back and away from you, and your thighs actually rotating in. Like if you were to put a piece of paper here, you kind of thread the paper through. So there's an internal rotation, which is going to help release that low back. And it's fine if you actually turn your toes in a little bit as well. Send the heels wide. And as we internally rotate, we open up the low back. Plant your hands, walk your feet in little baby steps back into downward facing dog with the strap. Do you feel that internal rotation? Your thighs are gently pressing out into the strap, pushing your thigh bones back. And then bending the knees down onto the floor. Grab your block. And we're going to place the block right between the thighs. Okay. And you can see my knees are hip width and I'm all locked in position. I do a little bit of chest opening here in camel pose, a couple different variations in camel pose. Because what I really want to focus on in this camel pose is engaging the legs. So oftentimes we are, when we come into back bends or when we're using our spine, we really take advantage of the flexibility of the low back and waist because there's no ribs there. And it's like, oh, look at all the stuff I can do here. So instead of actually using our body like we should and reaching really from our feet for something, we kind of tend to just kind of like crank into that low back, which can cause a lot of issues, a lot of pain in the low back, but also a lot of stiffness in the upper back and in the shoulders. So if we really use our legs and engage in our legs and then lengthen our low back, we can get much deeper into our chest, which is going to bring a lot of relief into our mid upper back. So you've got a block between your thighs here to make you stay kind of in alignment. You've got a strap around the knees to make you stay in alignment. So here you can actually feel that you can press down into the floor with your knees and kind of almost like you're trying to tear the mat apart. Okay. And if you lean the hips forward, you'll notice that you'll feel this. Let me take this sweatshirt off so it visually makes more sense. So if I just lean my hip, and I'm on black, that doesn't work. Black on black is not a good visual. Here we go. Okay, so if I have engaged legs, but I just lean my hips forward, you can see how right here, my low back, I get this little archy action. So I want to really train my pelvis and under, and that's where the strap comes in handy because it doesn't allow your knees to splay out. It keeps you in alignment. So I can really engage my legs here and actually take my butt really in under and forward. So if I were to think that I had a tail, okay, it's as if my tail was pulled between my legs, right? And somebody is trying to take me forward from between the legs with my tail. So my butt has to really come under. In order to get that butt to come under, you gotta engage the legs. So the butt's gotta squeeze together, hug it under, okay? Like you're trying to squeeze past somebody, shimmy down something, hug it under, and then send that forward. Now right here, there's a slouchy feeling. Once you do that, it's kind of this slouch feeling. I don't have to worry about my low back at all in this position. All I have to do is lift my chest, okay? So my legs engage, my butt comes under me, and then I open my chest. And that's gonna feel like a very different back bend. So make fists, plant those fists on the top of the butt cheeks so you can really feel under. And now I just squeeze my elbows together and lift my chest and push into my glutes, but I'm not pushing straight forward. I'm pushing more like forward and down. Okay, so I'm reminding myself that my hips need to come under me to come forward. And then I'm using that to lift my heart even higher while squeezing my elbows together. And that's gonna open up the chest. So I keep hugging the hips under, lifting my heart. Hug, lift, over and over and over. Maybe just a millimeter each and every time I come a little deeper. So I'm lengthening up and out of my low back, trying to move as much as I can up to the sky with my heart and under and forward with my hips. And then you come up, take a little breather, just dropping the hips down, and you can stay upright or you can take a little fold forward, child's pose, if that's comfortable with your block placement. Coming up, we're gonna do the same thing again. We're gonna shift our hand placement. If it feels like it's too much to shift your hand placement, you can always come right back to the fists and the glutes. We're actually gonna start there. So fists and the glutes, I want you to really hug the hips under. You're simultaneously squeezing that block with your inner thighs and trying to tear your legs apart by pushing into the strap. So it's a little bit of like a bipolar action happening in the legs. Hips go under, squeeze the elbows, lift the heart, okay? So I'm arching over something, kind of how you see high jumpers jump up and over. They don't crash back into their spine. They really are like lifting up as if they're trying to reach their chest up and over. So if you want to come deeper here, you'll take your thumbs into your armpits, and then it's that same idea of lifting up. But the important thing is that you can pull your shoulders down. Your elbows are going to come forward and continue that lifting up action. Squeeze the elbows together. Hug the hips, lift the heart. Hug the hips, lift the heart. And then you bring yourself up, rest back, maybe rest down. Okay, coming up, one more time, one last variation. So feel free to keep your hands on your hips. Feel free to stop in the second variation. We're going to walk through all three of them. So again, I've got a little bipolar action here. I'm somehow squeezing in on the block and starting to tear the block up, or the strap apart, hugging those hips under strongly so my glutes are really tight here. Hands on the glutes, I'm pushing down and forward, elbows in, push and lift. You want to come a little deeper, you take the thumbs into the armpits and you're lifting that tissue up. Elbows come forward and squeeze. And if you want to take it a little further, you slide the hands behind the head, interlacing the fingers, lift the head and drop the elbows out. So you really have to focus on lifting in that variation because we immediately want to take it into the low back. So feeling as if your heart is connected to another string that is lifting you up towards the sky. Legs are strong, squeeze that block, tear apart the strap. And then we come up, sink back, either resting in a seated position or coming down for child's pose. And we're gonna hang on to that block. Wiggle ourselves back into downward facing dog. So now we've got something between those thighs to think about threading backwards. You might need to re-engage your strap. Stretched out there a little bit. So I'm internally rotating, almost like I'm trying to push the block backwards between the thighs. And at the same time, I'm pressing out into the strap. And then walking the hands back into a forward fold where I continue that same action. Bend the knees, roll up. You're gonna unhook your strap. Take your block out and just stand for a moment. So a lot of times if I'm having back pain, I ask myself how I'm not using my legs. Because chances are you're not using your legs if you're having back pain. A lot of times we're just kind of, hanging out in our hips, sagging into our pelvis, and we're not really using our legs to stand firm. You do want to be thinking about when you're standing, am I pressing down into the floor? Am I resisting gravity by pushing down into the floor? Are my thighs working? Are my glutes working? Because a lot of times if you can feel the difference, so stand for a second and engage those legs. Like really, you're not locking out your knees. It's just I'm pushing down into the floor. My glutes are engaged. I'm standing strong. I'm almost trying to slightly tear the floor beneath me apart. And you can feel how everything feels taller and stable and sturdier through your whole spine. And then if you let all that go, immediately you feel it in the low back. I feel it in my shoulders, around my shoulder blades. There's a lack of an ability to have that lifted, floaty feeling, of like, oh yeah, I can just walk through life. It's super easy. There's this heaviness that comes that is not, it's not like a weighted blanket. It's not nice like that. It's a little like debilitating. So ask yourself when you're standing or seated and you're like, oh God, I'm just having this pain. Where is that coming from? Is that coming from the position I'm in? Is that coming from a lack of engagement of my lower body? And how can I shift that? Okay, cool. Let's do a little bit of hip opening, lunge style. I'm just gonna shut this window because I'm starting to freeze my butt off. Okay. So coming to a lunge, right foot forward. And we're not actually going to drop into the lunge yet. I want that foot out in front of you. And I want your hips stacked on top of the left leg. So all that stuff that we just worked on and really getting the button under us, we want to keep doing that as we come into these lunges. Because again, low back, super bendy, flexible. So I can very easily drop into this and take a lot of this in my low back. Okay, I can be still upright, and that's a pretty deep back bend, but it's all in my low back, and I'm not actually getting much of a hip stretch here. However, if I hug my booty under, super hug, and then think about leading into this pose with my left upper thigh. So it's as if there was a strap attached to my thigh bone. I really should not have worn black to match the black behind me today. Dun, dun, thinking on the fly. There we go. change the background. Okay, so that's kind of better. So if I'm here and I really hug my hips under and I lead with my left thigh, I'm not going to be able to come quite as deep into that pose because I'm going to have a much deeper stretch happening and it feels different. So I feel this from the top of my kneecap all the way through the front of my thigh, and then I get it up into like my waist on the left-hand side here as well. Whereas if I were to let that go and come significantly deeper, I feel this, I don't even know. If I really push my hip down, I can kind of feel it around the greater trochanter, but I'm not getting my, it's like, this is like yoga porn. It's kind of like, well, look, my joints do this if I relax everything. But it's not actually getting me anywhere as far as opening up my pelvis. So I'm gonna hug the hips under. I'm also gonna put a little squishy object in under my knee because my knee is tender today. So hugging the hips under and then taking it forward from there. And then, I mean, gosh, I hardly came forward at all. And I've already got a really lovely stretch going through that quad. And I'm lifting, okay? I'm not falling into this lunge. I'm lifting up into this lunge and pressing the thigh bone down and forward. But my pelvis is pulling up. The front of my pelvis is pulling up. And it's so much deeper. And then again, I make sure that I can keep my chest open, that I can breathe deeply. And then back it up. Swap sides. So again, I start right on top of that right knee. Left leg is out in front of me a little bit. And I'm hugging everything under, thinking about all of this musculature in the front of the thigh actually lifting up towards my hip and the whole kind of front body lifting up. And then my bone, the thigh bone, is pushing forward in that hip joint. Before I even come forward into the lunge, that thigh bone is driving forwards. And then that's what presses me forward. And here on this side, I'm tighter. I'm even less needing to move into the pose to get a good stretch. But everything keeps lifting up, lifting up, lifting up, that thigh bone pushing forward, and my low back lengthening down. So again, this is where I'm getting a super deep stretch. But if I were just to sink into the pose, I mean, yeah, I can come super deep into this, but I'm not actually getting a stretch here. I feel far less sensation here than I do if I really hug everything under, engage everything, and come forward. Then I don't need to be, but if I was in the cover of Yoga Journal, sure. Dun, 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 look how fancy my yoga pose is. Sometimes, actually most of the time, less is more. So there's a slight internal rotation, which we've been working on in all of our poses today. And if you do think about rotating that thigh bone in slightly, you will feel a deeper stretch through this outer hip area. Keep lifting everything up, relaxing the shoulders down. And I'm lengthening the low back, lifting out of the pelvis. And it's like my knee lengthens down and everything else is trying to like come up and away. And then backing out of it. Whew. Coming into child's pose. Rolling up. We'll take another trip onto our back for Shavasana. So the request today was upper back, and we did a lot of hips. And there is a method to that madness, which if you've ever been on my massage table, you know, because I always start at the pelvis, because pretty much everything starts at the pelvis. All of our pain starts in our pelvis. So it is about being able to learn what to engage and what to disengage in the hips and in the legs so that the rest of the body can kind of flow open. So whenever you're feeling pain in your body, I invite you to take a moment and take a look at what's going on in the hips and what there needs to be opened, because chances are if you can open that up, the rest of the body is gonna flow through with you. So we're gonna come on down into Shavasana. And even though it is summertime and incredibly hot across much of the world right now, massive heat waves, it is not in Sweden. Coming onto your back, and again, feel the connection of your body into the floor. And let that invite you to surrender a little more deeply into the floor. Deepening your breath. Feel that massage moving through your body as the breath massages the body. And gently bending one knee, bringing the foot to the floor, and then the other. Lengthen your low back onto the floor, and then bring one knee at a time up to the chest. Rolling over onto one side, and then pressing yourself up to seated. Again, using the breath like a sponge, we inhale, pulling our energy back to ourselves. We exhale, resting more deeply in our body. Bringing the hands together in front of your heart center. Taking a moment of gratitude for your body. Let's take a second of gratitude towards those long days of our life that give us the opportunity to see how much magic we can create, see how much positivity we can cultivate, how much patience we can cultivate, much compassion we can cultivate. Thank you so much for joining me today. Namaste.